Well, we've already reached week 5 of the 2013 NFL season. Hard to believe, to be honest with you. The year's just flying by, as they always seem to. I would like to talk about a few of these week 5 games now. We'll be previewing every game in detail here at BETDAQ NFL, so we hope you check back over the course of the week. But a few of these games caught my eye. I'd like to mention them now quickly. Starting with the Thursday night game, the Buffalo Bills going on the road to face the Cleveland Browns. Cleveland is a 4-point favorite on BETDAQ. Now, who would have thunk it? This is going to be a very interesting game. I'm looking forward to this game, and when you took a look at the schedule before the season and you saw that Thursday night in Week 5 was the Bills and the Browns, you probably weren't too excited about that game. You probably thought maybe that's a good night to take the wife out to dinner or something. Turns out these teams, both surprises. Both 2-2, despite the fact they were both expected to be among the worst teams in the AFC. Cleveland especially has a lot of positive mojo going for them right now. And who'd have thought we'd be saying that just 2 weeks ago when Cleveland traded their best offensive player, Trent Richardson, to the Indianapolis Colts for a draft pick. Everybody was saying the Browns were tanking the season, intentionally making their team worse just to improve their standing in the upcoming draft. And obviously that didn't create a whole lot of positive vibes around the Cleveland franchise. However, the team pulled together, beat the Minnesota Vikings on the road 2 weeks ago, and then last week, a very impressive performance in beating the Cincinnati Bengals in Cleveland. Now the Browns sit at 2-2, again, 4-point favorites over the Bills. And to be honest with you, it'd be very tough for me to bet against the Browns in this situation. Cleveland has been playing great defense this season. They currently rank 3rd in the NFL in yards per game allowed. And Buffalo, even though they've done some good things on offense this year, and Buffalo has been better as a whole than we've expected them to be, they still are starting a rookie quarterback. This will only be E.J. Manuel's second career road start. His first career road start did not go very well against the New York Jets a couple of weeks ago. Manuel looked like a deer in the headlights, was sacked 8 times, and he'll be facing a similarly tough defense here in Cleveland. The total here is extremely low. BETDAQ's offering 2 total markets right now, 41 and 40.5. Certainly understand why the total is there. Because Cleveland, even though Brian Hoyer, the quarterback who's filled in for the last couple of weeks since Brandon Weeden's been out with that hand injury, Hoyer has played well. He's brought a spark to this Cleveland offense. It probably won't be Brandon Weeden's job anymore when he comes back. However, the Cleveland offense still not explosive by any means, only managing 17 points in that win over Cincinnati last week. And we already talked about how well their defense is playing, so I do have a lean towards the under in this game, even though the total is very low. And I do have an early Browns lean here. Like what I've seen out of the Browns over the last couple of weeks, tough to bet against them in this spot right here, I think, especially with E.J. Manuel making his second career road start. Another game I want to talk about, the Detroit Lions going on the road to face the Green Bay Packers. Green Bay, a 7-point favorite on BETDAQ, 53 the total in this game. This is interesting to me because this game is going to tell us a lot about both teams. You know, people talk about the Packers like they're a known commodity. Just today I was talking to somebody about NFL football, and this person was talking about Super Bowl favorites, and the Packers were about the 2nd or 3rd team they mentioned. That's really not the reality of this team anymore. Last season they made the playoffs, but they weren't nearly as good as they had been for the previous 2 years. And this year they've only played 3 games. Remember, they had a bye last week, and they've lost 2 of those 3 games. Having some problems on defense after we saw some improvement out of that defense last year. So Green Bay, a 7-point favorite here over a Detroit team that has gotten off to a good start. Now, Detroit, as I said, I think we'll learn a lot about both of these teams because where do you go with Detroit? This team won 10 games 2 years ago, was an absolute disaster last year, one of the worst teams in the league to back, finished with a 4-12 record. Yet here they are, looking sort of like the 2011 Detroit Lions. Their offense humming along, 5th in the league in pass yards per game. They scored 25 or more points in every one of their games. But again, a 7-point dog on the road in Green Bay. Feels like a lot of points to me. I know Green Bay is coming off a bye. I know they're 1-2, so they'll certainly have motivation on their side. I'm sure they want to get this thing straightened out. And they have had some success against Detroit recently. However, Detroit's been playing better football this season. I know we have a very small sample size, just 3 games for Green Bay, 4 games for Detroit. But this could be one of those instances where people are relying too much on what's happened in the past. too much on the Green Bay Packers team that they expected to see coming into the season, or the Green Bay Packers, what they think the Green Bay Packers are instead of the reality of what this team is. And certainly, I'm not saying the Packers are a bad team. Of course not. In their last home game, they blew out the Washington Redskins. However, I don't know. Very curious to see if they're going to be able to cover this number against the Detroit Lions at home on Sunday. I will be watching. Another game I'll be watching, but for a different reason, because it's sort of like a car wreck. You just can't turn away. That is the Jacksonville Jaguars going on the road to face the St. Louis Rams. Don't mind telling you now, this is one of my favorite games of the week. The Rams have been awful for the past couple of weeks. Awful. Now, I haven't backed the Rams the last couple of weeks. However, I have recommended a Rams bet. As you know, we pick every single game here on BETDAQ NFL, which gets a little difficult because like everybody else, I have my 4 or 5 games that I like much better than the others, and some of the games are nothing but coin flips, but we try to give a little bit of advice on every game, and I have leaned towards the Rams the last couple of weeks, and they have gotten stomped. And this last week, watching them on Thursday night against San Francisco 49ers, I thought, why do I have faith in this team again? The defense is not playing well. The offense clearly still struggling. Sam Bradford, is he ever going to fulfill his potential? Tired of people making excuses for Bradford, saying he doesn't have anything around him. Other quarterbacks who were drafted where Bradford was drafted number 1 overall, they make do. They raise the level of the players around them. I'm thinking guys like Andrew Luck, who came into a terrible situation in Indianapolis, instantly made that situation better. So, couldn't have been any lower on the Browns after last Thursday, or on the Rams, after last Thursday's game. And so I see the Rams at home this week, and a friend of mine saw this line before I saw it, and the line my friend saw was a point higher than BETDAQ has it. And he said, you will never guess what the line is in the St. Louis-Jacksonville game. Of course, I live here in Jacksonville, so discussions about Jacksonville, the Jags, are fairly common. And I said, I don't know, 9 or 10, something like that. And he said, 12.5. He said, can you believe the Rams who have won 1 game, the Rams who've been blown out 2 weeks in a row, they don't have any business being 12.5 point favorites over anybody, etc., etc. My friend went on to say that he thought the line was going to be something like 7. While he was saying this, I began to play out the scenario in my head that we're going to see on Sunday. And by the time he was finished talking, I had decided that the St. Louis Rams, if they weren't my favorite game of the week, they were going to be one of my favorite games of the week. Let me tell you, folks, opportunity right here. A lot of people are going to see this line, and they're going to say just what my friend said. They're going to say, hey, ain't no way I'm backing the Rams and laying a double-digit number. Those people have most likely not seen the Jacksonville Jaguars play football this season. To say the Jags are the worst team in the NFL, that's not taking it far enough. This could be the worst team in the history of the NFL, and that's not overstating it. The Jags are already one of only 6 teams in NFL history to lose their first 4 games by double digits, by 10 points or more. 6 teams on that list now. That list gets smaller and smaller as they continue to lose games by double digits. Certainly, I guess I'm in no position to say worst team in history. I was born in 1981, so my memories sort of start in the late 80s there, and those are hazy. However, if we're going to say the worst team in NFL history is the Detroit Lions team a few years ago that went 0-16, the only winless team in NFL history, then I think we can say pretty definitively that the Jacksonville Jaguars are the worst team because they're worse than that Detroit Lions team. No doubt about it. I remember that Detroit Lions team extremely clearly. They had a chance to win a couple of games there towards the end of the season. I believe they almost beat New England or somebody in week 13 or 14 or 15. This Jaguars team has no chance of anything like that happening. Don't know if you heard, but a couple of hours ago, they made their team even worse, trading starting offensive tackle Eugene Monroe, who's their starting left tackle, to the Baltimore Ravens for draft picks. Now, certainly you say, how much worse can it get? And that's a valid point. However, Monroe, one of the better players, if not the best player on that offensive line. You take Monroe out of the situation, and the team is worse any way you slice it. Going on the road this week to face the St. Louis Rams, a team that, despite their slow start, 1-3, I'm betting hasn't quite given up on the season, given their youth, given their coach, Jeff Fisher, and given the expectations this team had heading into the year. I'm thinking they are going to be plenty motivated and raring to go at home on Sunday, facing this Jacksonville Jaguar offense that is the worst in the NFL by a wide, wide margin. The Jags, it's just a comedy of errors. Every week it gets worse on offense. You thought it couldn't get any worse than week 1 against Kansas City when they didn't cross their own 36, didn't get within 13 yards of the 50 until midway through the fourth quarter. But it sort of seems to get progressively worse. I mean, last week in their 37-3 loss to Indianapolis, Jags managed, right around 200 yards of total offense. I believe the final tally was 206, 207. For the second straight week, they suffered the indignity of having their opponent pull their starters out of the game and finish the game with backups. It's an absolute embarrassment in Jacksonville right now, an embarrassment to watch this team. And quite frankly, as a Jacksonville resident, a Jaguar fan, a Jacksonville sports fan in general, I'm a little tired of all the positivity I'm hearing around this area. It seems like people are doing nothing but giving this regime excuses, saying, what can you expect? What can you expect with what they inherited? I'll tell you what you can expect. You can expect them not to field the worst team in franchise history, including the franchise year. There is no excuse for this. The previous general manager, Gene Smith, he can only be blamed for as bad as the team was last year. 2-14. Gene Smith can be blamed for all of that. He can't be blamed for any worse than that. And make no mistake, this team is worse than last year's 2-14 group. Jacksonville entered this season as the only team in the NFL with a first-time GM, first-time head coach, and an offensive coordinator who had never called plays in the NFL. They were indisputably the greenest front office and coaching staff in the NFL, and they look like it. They are coaching like it. They are making personnel moves like they don't know what they're doing. We'll see. I mean, time will tell. Obviously, this regime is going to get a couple years to work it out. Certainly hard to watch right now, and I think the Jags have little or no chance of even hanging around in St. Louis. As bad as the Rams are, they are much, much better. I'd say light years better than the Jacksonville Jaguars. And given their current predicament and their current situation, I don't think they'll be letting off the gas in the second half. Don't expect to see the Rams pulling any of their starters, even if they do have a comfortable lead. I think Jeff Fisher would like to build as much positive mojo as he possibly can for that team. So ignore what the Rams have done this year. Ignore any biases you have about not laying double-digit numbers in the NFL. Back the St. Louis Rams this week. Fading the Jacksonville Jaguars has been the greatest money-making strategy in the NFL this season. I'm kicking myself for actually having gone 1 week now without betting against the Jags, because the weeks that I have bet against the Jags, they've been my easiest wins of the week, including last week when we were toasting and counting our money midway through the second quarter. Love St. Louis this week as 11.5-point home favorites. That number is 11.5 on BETDAQ. 11.5-point home favorites over the Jacksonville Jaguars. Another game I'd like to talk about should be much more competitive. Baltimore Ravens going to Miami to face the Dolphins. Miami a 2.5-point favorite on BETDAQ. 43.5 the total in this game. Ravens, a tough team to figure. Looked very bad in their Week 1 loss to Denver. That defense was absolutely shredded. Didn't look particularly good on offense either. Then they won a couple of games and looked good doing it. Last week, though, they went on the road, suffered a confusing loss to Buffalo. Baltimore was a short road favorite in that game, and we said that line looked a little suspicious. Baltimore only a 3-point favorite there. It was tough to make a case for Buffalo because Baltimore had looked so good the 2 previous weeks, and Buffalo, of course, starting a rookie quarterback. They're not great on offense or defense. Lo and behold, Buffalo was able to beat the Ravens. So now we're sitting here. Baltimore has had 2 good performances at home, 2 bad performances on the road, facing a Miami Dolphins team who has been exposed a little bit on defense over the last couple of weeks. Now, heading into their last game with the Saints, the Dolphins ranked 8th in the NFL, allowing 17.7 points per game. So the stats look good with this defense. But if you've seen him the last couple of weeks, obviously last week against Drew Brees, a couple of days ago, Drew Brees throwing for over 400 yards on 30 of 39 or whatever. Doesn't take a rocket scientist to see that there's some problems with that secondary, or there's problems with a lot of secondaries when they're facing the Saints on the road. However, even the week before, when Miami pulled out a home win over the Atlanta Falcons, and on the surface, it all looked great because Miami, after all, had just beaten a team that went to the NFC Championship game last season. However, if you watched that game and you saw how easily Atlanta moved the ball despite all the injuries they were dealing with on offense. Remember, Atlanta was dealing with a banged-up offensive line. Roddy White is a shell of himself with that high ankle sprain. Starting running back Steven Jackson was out. So Falcons had some injury problems on offense. They were not 100%. And I'm telling you, they moved it right up and down the field in that game. And I know because I was watching intently, because I was on Miami. I was rooting for the Dolphins. And so it really sunk into me after that game that, hey, Miami, they might be a good team, but they're not there yet, especially in the secondary. And that is why I was all over New Orleans as a 6.5-point favorite against Miami this last week. Here the Dolphins are hosting the Baltimore Ravens. Not really sure where I'm going to go with this one. Looking forward to watching the game. Think it's going to be a very competitive game. That Dolphins secondary, how will they hold up against Joe Flacco and the Baltimore Ravens passing attack? Now, Flacco is dealing with a shortage of weapons this season. There's no question about that. But Flacco himself has come into his own over the last couple of years. We know with the Super Bowl victory now that all the questions of, can Joe Flacco cut it? Is he the weak link on this Ravens team? Those questions are now dumb. Flacco can cut it. He will be the Ravens quarterback for many, many years. However, he's still probably wouldn't be considered one of the best 5 or 6 quarterbacks in the league. But Joe Flacco, the way he's played the last couple of seasons, including this year, I'm leaving his 5 interception performance last week out here. I'm aware that happened. But I've been impressed what I've seen out of Joe Flacco this year by and large. I think he is taking that step now into becoming a top 10 quarterback and maybe taking that step into the elite category of the top 5 or 6. I don't think he's there yet. I know that word elite is so overused anyway, but interested to see how much success Flacco can have against this Miami secondary, and interested to see if the Miami offense can have success against this Baltimore defense, because what do you make of the Ravens defense? Again, they looked terrible in week 1. Weeks 2 and 3, they looked, quite frankly, they looked better than the Baltimore defense last year looked. And then last week, again, they weren't bad against Buffalo. Flacco's 5 interceptions had a lot to do with that loss, but they certainly weren't dominant either. The Dolphins are better offensively than the Buffalo Bills, probably better offensively than any team that Baltimore has faced since the Denver Broncos. As I say that, I'm thinking about the Houston Texans. The Texans, I guess, probably have a better offense than Miami, so maybe I take that back. I retract that. When we sit here and talk for 15, 20 minutes, sometimes we go on little tangents that, as I'm saying it, I might be thinking, that doesn't sound quite right. Anyway, the Dolphins with a top half of the league offense, led by that passing game. Ryan Tannehill completing 66% of his passes this year. He's shown some definite growth. He's surrounded by some better weapons with Mike Wallace, Brandon Gibson. He's made good use of those guys. So will Tannehill and the Dolphins continue the positive role they've been on this season that was interrupted last week or Monday night on the road in New Orleans? Or will they fall to the Baltimore Ravens? I have an early Miami lean here, but I sort of like this Miami team. I sort of like watching them, sort of like rooting for them, even though obviously I was rooting against them this past week. So I do have an early Miami lean here, but don't know whether that's just because this Miami team sort of has a positive shine for me right now. Maybe because they made me some money a couple of games early in the season and then made me money betting against them last week. You always like teams that you feel like you can, you have a good beat on. But so this might be a game I stay away from, but definitely a game I'm going to be watching closely. Baltimore on the road in Miami should tell us a lot about both of these teams and should be a good early indicator, I think, in the AFC playoff race, because I don't expect either one of these teams to win their division. I do think Cincinnati is still the best team in the AFC North, and I do like New England in the AFC East. But both these teams could be wildcard contenders. I think we'll know more about both on Sunday. Final game I'd like to mention quickly here. The Denver Broncos going on the road to face the Dallas Cowboys. Denver has been the best team in the NFL this season. No question about it. They've scored the second most points in NFL history through 4 games. They are 7.5-point road favorites in Dallas. This game, another game, very, very interesting to me because I feel like if you're going to get the Denver Broncos this season, you're going to have to outscore them. And obviously, listen, anytime to beat somebody, you have to outscore them technically. What I mean by that is I don't believe there's a defense in the NFL that is going to stop or even really slow down this Denver Broncos offense. I mean, maybe if they play a team like Seattle, a team like that, they might be held to 24, 28 points, somewhere in that area. But I can't see anybody really having any answers when facing this Denver Bronco offense. However, the Denver defense can be had. This is not the same Denver defense that we saw last season that ranked top 5 in the NFL and yards allowed and points allowed. This is a different defense. They give up some yardage. They give up some points. A lot of that has to do with the fact they've been missing their two best defensive players, Von Miller and Champ Bailey. So if you're going to catch this Denver defense, you might want to catch him now. Von Miller just about done with his 6-game suspension, and it sounds like Champ Bailey's foot is finally getting healthy. So we do expect the defense to improve once those guys get healthy and get back playing. Miller, obviously, it's not a health concern. It's that drug suspension. But once he gets back on the field, once Bailey gets healthy, we do expect Denver to improve on defense. But will they be an elite defense? They haven't been close to elite yet. So I don't think that just those two guys coming back, all of a sudden the Denver Broncos is going to switch into that top 5 mode that they were in last year. So, will they face an offense this season that can outscore them? Will they face that offense this Sunday? The Dallas Cowboys, the type of team that when they get things rolling offensively, they can score with anybody. Got plenty of weapons in the passing game. Now, there will be a little short-handed. Miles Austin injured. He is expected to be out for he is expected to miss this game again. But still, Tony Romo surrounded with weapons like Jason Witten, Dez Bryant. DeMarco Murray's been able to stay healthy this year and provide that offense with some balance. In Dallas, this could be a spot. Could be a spot. Now, and I certainly am not going to bet against Denver this week, not after watching this team for the last couple of weeks. I think I'm going to have to see Denver struggle a little bit before I even consider betting against them. But I'm not sure I'll be backing the Broncos this week either. This is a dangerous feeling game for them. If they are going to lose a spot like this on the road against a team with a high-powered offense that just may be able to match them score for score, this could be the type of game that Denver has trouble with if they're going to have trouble with any game. So if you are going to have a play on this game and you don't feel comfortable backing Denver, if you feel like a little bit of a long shot, you might want to try a Dallas money line bet. This is a good price there for Dallas money line. Not many people expecting the Broncos to lose right now, and I'm not expecting the Broncos to lose either, especially since this Monty Kiffin Dallas defense. Remember, Monty Kiffin was a defensive coordinator for, I believe, 7 years when Peyton Manning was with the Indianapolis Colts. So he practiced against this Tampa 2 defense every day, knows it very well. They're running the same scheme in Dallas, so Manning should know how to attack this defense. There's a lot of things obviously working in Denver's favor in this spot. But again, if Denver is going to lose, I believe it's going to come against a team like the Cowboys, a team with a high-powered offense who might be able to match the Broncos score for score. So I will be watching to see if that happens on Sunday. Of course, we'll be watching all these games, not just these 5 I've mentioned. And as I said, we'll be going through each one in detail here at BETDAQ NFL. So we do hope you check back over the course of the week. Until then, for BETDAQ NFL, I'm John Arnette. Thanks for bearing with me through this video, folks.